Welcome to our web exclusive. I'm Mike Montecalvo, along with Eyewitness News analyst Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio. And General, we're going to start off with the Defense Department budget cuts. Actually, it turns out that Rhode Island and Connecticut are going to make out a little bit, especially Electric Boat, because jobs will be added there despite the cuts.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the long-range plan, which is obviously over the next several decades, according to Casey at Electric Boat down in Quonset. It's talking about a significant program for the next 10 years, which is really opposite of what we had looked to as a possibility of losing some $1 trillion over the next 10 years. So good news for Rhode Island, certainly, and certainly to Connecticut. Well,
Electric Boat was at the WPRI Eyewitness News job fair this week, and they were looking for workers there. And they're not just adding, $10 an hour jobs. We're talking about some jobs that could pay about $70,000.
Here's a good opportunity for the education system in Rhode Island. At the same conference, he talked about having the availability and access to specialty fields to be able to do the kind of work that Electric Boat needs. So I think this is a good opportunity to have our educational institutions, specifically the technical aspects of our education facilities, to be able to develop this workforce to satisfy building these ships over the next 10 years or so.
And really that's been kind of the negative on the state of Rhode Island, that it's not just training workers at Electric Boat, just training workers in general. And it's amazing with all the colleges that we have here in Rhode Island.
It's amazing. And I think unless we look at the last several years, it always had been that we looked at education, meaning you need to produce a 4-year degree in something. We need to move away from that and understand that the technical field is equally important, if not more so, in the case of building such things as steam fitters and iron workers and welders and those kinds of things that are not part of a 4-year degree in personnel management, as an example. So I think that's really what we need to do, is move away from the 4-year degree and get into the technical fields.
And General, that might be actually less expensive.
Probably
than going to the 4-year college. Before we get off this topic, let's talk about Newport News, because I remember, over the years, Electric Boat always had that competition with Newport News in Virginia. How do they play out in all of this?
Well, they probably have access to other contracts. Groton and Electric Boat specifically are heavy on submarines. Newport News, I think, has more of a diversity for other kinds of ships that the Navy might need over the next decades or the next budget cycle anyway. So I think our competition really has always been because of our access to Groton, and our facility at Newport, at Quonset rather, has given us an edge over Newport News, because Newport News has a lot of other Navy ships in the area as well as their construction capability.
Also new this week, we're finding out that 14 cadets are facing disenrollment from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in New London for allegedly using synthetic marijuana that kind of mimics the effects of pot. Usually means a discharge, right, when it's talking about
normally it means a discharge or certainly a dismissal from the academy. It depends on, of course, the severity of their particular participation. It could range anywhere from having a disciplinary action and not dismissal to dismissal and with a less than honorable discharge. So it depends on whether in fact they were the administrators of this little thing that was going on, or just they happened to be participants of it. So it really depends on the severity of the particular investigation that would target those 14 individuals and what the ultimate disciplinary action would be.
Has this become a nationwide issue now?
I don't think it's a nationwide issue as far as the drug abuse is concerned. That's always been a problem. I think the significance is that we're seeing more and more of the abuses ranging from abuse of controlled substances to sexual abuse in the academies. More, I think, because the individual students are becoming more trustful of the system versus reporting something and having nothing done, and all of a sudden you are the bad guy. So I think we're seeing more of it because more of it's being reported.
It's also a call on another topic for local police departments to, I guess, basically go back to basics. Federal and law enforcement officials have seen a surge in police shootings. Just in 2012, General, we're not out of the first month, and 4 police officers across the country have been killed because of gunfire. Why do you think that is?
I think it has to do with the environment we're in, and certainly our society that we're living in today. The individuals that are bad guys think nothing of taking a human life and using a gun as the first step in their committing whatever crime they're doing. But I think it's really incumbent upon the training aspects that we use to have an all hazards approach, to expecting that when you stop someone for a traffic violation, you need to be aware that they could in fact be more than just a speeder or someone that's changing lanes without using the proper signal. You need to treat them as though the worst possibility, they would perhaps be armed or there for other intentions rather than just speeding.
You know, there are some police officers that would say that 99% of their work is boredom and 1% is panic, and routine stops are usually the most dangerous ones to look at.
Exactly, and that 1% can be a real challenge, I'm sure, from time to time. So when you look at what happens in that 1% of the time, you could look at all of these fatalities that we've seen in the last year or two within that 1%, certainly. And stuff doesn't happen during the boredom aspects of their job.
What about the drug raids? Do they need to be reassessed now and how they do that?
Well, I think so. You know, you need to understand that drug raids, as we used to look at them, had much to do with the kind of intelligence that we got as this was going to take place because you had some inside information. Today, I think it's so widespread that you really have a problem determining that the information you have is dependable and accurate to be able to perform a drug raid without having some collateral aspects to that particular raid too, which could mean that while you're doing the drug raid, you might uncover some other crime, and that could precipitate some additional violence.
On January 11th, it is the anniversary of Gitmo. It was 10 years ago that it opened, and in the last presidential election, we heard Barack Obama talk about one of his campaign promises that he would close Guantanamo Bay. Well, 10 years later, it is still open. Is this one of those things that you make a campaign promise and then you go into the office and say, hey, look, I was probably wrong, we need to keep it open?
Absolutely, and I think we can look at that, not the specific scenario with each of our presidents, but you get briefed when you're a legitimate candidate, and as you get closer to the election, you get more intelligence and security briefings, but you don't get access to all of the information until you are the president and commander-in-chief. Once that happens, all of a sudden you have access that you didn't have access to before, and making these promises based upon the thought that you can do this doesn't get supported by obviously having access to classified information and really top secret information that you couldn't have access to when you went to president.
Yeah, we've seen this so many times. Would it be refreshing to see a candidate or a president at this point come out and say, hey, look, I was wrong about that? That's not going to happen, though, is it?
It won't happen, but I think that would be a refreshing aspect. So, look, I made this promise, but because I didn't have the information at the time, I do now, and I need to tell you I can't follow through on this particular commitment that I made. That would be absolutely refreshing, and I think the American people would appreciate that.
What's the long-range plan at this point for Guantanamo Bay?
I don't think you're going to have a long-range plan until you can come up with a legitimate justice system that would be obviously supportable by our Constitution and treat terrorists as terrorists. They should not be, in my opinion, entitled to the same protection that you would as a citizen of the United States, but at the same time, we are a country that professes due process and all the other things that go with protecting human rights. Somewhere along the line, there has to be a better system to be able to say, this individual was a terrorist, we need to treat him this way. If you're a citizen and you're a terrorist, then perhaps there may be some adjustment as to how we treat that individual.
What's your take, General, on Iran launching some new underground facility to enrich uranium?
In 1980,
Russia's actually come out and made a statement about that, too.
Back in the 80s, the same thing was happening, but it wasn't on the ground, but Israel went out and took them out. I think Russia's making its concern known that if the same thing happened, you could, in fact, precipitate a long-range war within the Mideast on top of this. We don't really know at this point whether they have enriched uranium for the purpose of developing nuclear weapons. But if we know that they are doing this enrichment for that purpose, it would be wise for us to take them out now versus having to deal with a nuclear confrontation 2 or 3 years from now.
We saved 2 of their boats in the last week.
But did you notice that the kind of appreciation they showed was about zero? And unfortunately, that's who we are. We do good things for other countries, and when it comes time to thank us, they can't be found.
And we'll continue to do that, I take it?
I think so.
Finally, World War I veteran could receive the Medal of Honor because I guess he was overlooked before because he was Jewish, correct?
Well, allegedly there was an accepted society within the military back in World War I that used to discriminate against Jewish people for whatever reason. Then an introduction of different legislation allowed that to be openly looked at and compromised, that if this was the case, and then there would be some consequences to deal with. And now that they've uncovered the possibility that this individual could in fact be the recipient of the Medal of Honor, that investigation is ongoing, and I think there's a strong possibility he could be awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously, obviously.
And there's no timetable on this right now, right?
No, there isn't.
Okay. General, thank you very much
Good
for
to
your
be here.
comments. Thanks for watching.